Let's try, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Kugelman. I'm the Senior Associate for South Asia with the Wilson Center's Asia program. Today's event has been jointly organized with the Center for Islam and Religious Freedom, and I'm very grateful for this collaboration. I also extend a special thanks to our internal co-sponsor, which is the Wilson Center's Middle East program. This morning's discussion will focus on Pakistan's blasphemy law, a topic as complex as it is delicate. This is a law that is meant to protect against insults to Islam, and yet critics of the law contend that it is repeatedly exploited to persecute religious minorities in Pakistan. And for many in Pakistan, the blasphemy law is regarded as utterly sacrosanct, immune to adjustment, reform, or even criticism. And as you all know, in 2011, when Punjab province governor Salman Taseer dared to publicly condemn the blasphemy law and offer robust support for Asaya Bibi, a Christian woman imprisoned for violating the law, he was gunned down. And then just a few months ago, Taseer's killer, Mumtaz Qadri, was executed, and thousands filled the streets to mourn Qadri's. But Qadri, and the protesters demanded that all of those imprisoned for violating the blasphemy law be executed. In Pakistan, once you're accused of committing blasphemy, your life is instantly at risk. There are cases where violent mobs have set upon, attacked, and killed those that are branded as blasphemers. And publicly and actively encouraging critical review of the blasphemy laws, much less calling for their reform, is a bold and a brave position to take. Contending that the law is not necessarily unassailable is a bold and brave position to take. But this is the very crux of the advocacy carried out by today's speaker, Arafat Mazhar. He's the director of Engage Pakistan, which is a nonprofit group that seeks to reform Pakistan's blasphemy law, and much of his advocacy work revolves around using Islamic legal reasoning to demand changes to the blasphemy law. And that's essentially what his presentation today will consist of. He's going to draw an Islamic legal tradition to lay out a perspective at odds with much of the conventional wisdom about Pakistan's blasphemy laws, and particularly that they're unassailable. He will also propose some ways to address their modern applicability. So it should be quite an enriching and an eye-opening discussion. So after we hear from Arafat, there will be plenty of time for discussion and questions and answers. So now I turn things over to you, Arafat.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much. You've been very kind. Everyone can hear me? The mic's on, right? Up. Okay. Yeah. Is that all right? So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to be speaking at the Wilson Center. And right off start, I would like to thank Michael, the Wilson Center. I would like to thank Jennifer and the whole of CERF, the Center for Islam and Religious Freedom. I also serve as an advisory on the advisory council over the CERF, and they've been very kind so far. And it's been a real pleasure. So I'm going to start right away, and I'm going to start off on a personal note. Why am I doing this before I go into the whole jurisprudence and Islamic legal tradition of this? And part of this was covered by Michael in the introductory remark when he talked about 2010. And I want everyone to keep that in perspective as we move forward. So the governor of Punjab, Salman Taseer, goes to a Christian woman who's been accused of blasphemy and requests for an executive pardon, right, a waiver of the death penalty. And he was assassinated by his bodyguard, Mumtaz Qadri, right, and like 27 bullets, all of it inside of him. And then right after that, I mean, international community responded differently, and the progressive elite responded differently. But there was this huge population in Pakistan that suffered a great deal of anxiety of identity, right? So who am I, right? If I'm a Muslim, do I have to be this person? Is there a way for me to be Muslim? Is there a way for me to love the Prophet and not be this person? And to start off, that's what drove me at a personal level and my own love for the Prophet. I'm here because at a personal level, I have a deep love for Prophet, and that drives me. But later on, it's justice that drove me. And the thing is, right now, as he said, critiquing the law, the letter of the law, the interpretation of the law itself is, at a social sphere, considered blasphemy. That's pretty much clear. I mean, just as we speak, for the past 4 days, the same people who called for Salman Taseer's assassination have been spreading this picture, right, of a person with a Google map, a house location, saying that either the government go arrest him within 4 or 5 days, or anyone who kills him will be given this amount of money. And it's viral, right? And it's a small group, yet it has all the monopoly in the conversation, and we don't seem to have a seat on the table, right? So before I start off, you can see the letter of the law itself, which is part, like, you know, the letter of the law states, whoever by words, either spoken or written, or by visible representation, or by any imputation, innuendo, or insinuation, directly or indirectly, defiles the sacred name of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, shall be punished with death or imprisonment for life, and shall also be liable to fine. And you'll notice here that there's a discretion, death or life, right? And if Salman Taseer was asking for something other than death, it's already there. The thing is, that has been changed. Now the law is only death. It was changed through an order by court because they said, and I'll go into it later, that death is the only punishment. If you blaspheme, you die. So blasphemy is essentially, it's called sabb-e rasul in Islamic jurisprudence, right? Because blasphemy is a huge word. So if you defile the Quran, you defile Islam, it's a different law. But the capital punishment law is sabb-e rasul, right? In English, they write it S-A-B-B, rasul, right? Or shatm-e rasul. That's the term that you find in Islamic jurisprudence. Blasphemy is basically a Christian term, but since in English we still haven't figured out how to say the term that doesn't cover everything, right? That doesn't cover the Quran and Islam, because they're all very different conceptualization in law and in people's mind. So I'm going to be making 2 claims today, right, with you guys. I'm going to make 2 claims. Number one, that the law, Pakistan's blasphemy law, and its letter and its judicial interpretation and in its social imagination is a complete perversion and deliberate perversion of the Islamic legal tradition. It's an institutionalized perversion of the Islamic legal tradition. That's going to be my claim number 1, right? And my claim number 2 would be that Islamic legal tradition has within itself, and this is something we hear a lot from the academics in the Near Eastern studies, right? You hear it from Professor Halak, Professor Qasim Salman, everyone. The Islamic legal tradition has within itself resources to reform and reimagine. And the word in Arabic for reform is tajdeed. It means renewal. So sometimes people have an issue with the word reform because they say it's a Christian word, right? So the parallel word would be tajdeed. So it's like T-A-J-D-E-E-D, tajdeed. It means renewal. And there's a tradition that every 100 years you need to do a tajdeed, reimagine Islamic legal tradition. So reform and reimagine the blasphemy law in such a way, now this part is important, that they're aligned with the international human rights commitments and the fundamental rights that are promised in the Constitution, right? So 3 frameworks, there's a common place there, and that's going to be my second claim. And I'm going to talk about previous efforts at the law because I myself, I mean, I've been working on it for a while. I've only received a couple of death threats, but not very serious, but I've been pretty much safe. And I want to talk about why I think previous efforts of 30 years have sort of not been successful, right? And number one is that it has been exclusively a human right-based discourse. Now the problem isn't that human rights is an issue, but it's the language and the theories and the principles are not something that are indigenous to the population in Pakistan. And it's been very rhetorical. It's not been very substantive, and it's been like, the law is barbaric, the law is not civilized. It's like this whole thing where you come to a third world country, let us teach you some civilization, right? And that creates some problems, right? That escalates things. And there's the perception of a foreign import, that we just got rid of you guys, right, in 1947, the Western civilization. And I'm being the devil's advocate here, and I'm saying, right, and like, you're gonna come us and tell us how to live our lives. And what that does is that conversation is not happening. There's no deconstruction of the current actual discourse. So they're two entirely different frameworks and languages trying to talk with each other. And the liberal progressive forces, ranging from Shahid Rahman, there was a parliamentarian who attempted at reform. And I love Shahid Rahman, but her bill was really badly researched. I mean, there were mistakes in there about the ideas, and that shows that there wasn't enough research of what's out there. It was just coming from within what I want it to be like. And of course, also the authority, the idea of authority. How do you come with a discourse, excuse me, that has authority at social, religious, and political level and has moral weight? That's a huge issue. And what it does is, with all this let us civilize you discourse, and exclusively human rights discourse, it solidifies adversarial positions, right? A binary, it escalates that binary. It solidifies it. So it's two sides. It's the godless, secular, anti-Islamic people versus the custodians of the religion, right? And that does not allow for conversation. Which side are you on, right? So it's like, are you with them or are you with us? And that's never helpful in advocacy and changing discourse. So no dialogue means no engagement, and that's why we called our organization Engage. It came out of this realization, and that's why we work very closely with madrasas. Our closest partners, sorry, sir, has been madrasas. Yeah, just kidding, right? And the madrasas have been our closest partners, they're closest friends, because we're trying to reestablish trust, civil society with madrasas, civil society with universities, right? Now, ulama in Gujranwala know about surf. They know about Jonathan Brown at Georgetown University. And soon they'll know about Dr. Asfa's work. So engaging them in a conversation rather than the whole, the law is so barbaric, let's get rid of it, right? And that may actually be true. That may even be true. But there's a problem in what is underneath, the meta-narrative that goes with it. So what's the different way to complement the human rights discourse? And why is the law seen as immutable? Why is it God's law, right? Why can't you talk about it? And here I'll come with two terms that I have to talk about. I will still say them, and I'll want you guys to just keep them in your head. Number one, that blasphemy is a Hud, right? Now Hud, H-U-D-D, Hud, literally means limit. And there are a few hudud laws in Islamic law, and blasphemy has never been one of them, right? So they say it's Hud, and there is never a discretion in Hud. It's like God has laid it down in the Quran, which is the primary text, and no judge, parliamentarian, no Salman Taseer, no Arafat Mazhar can come in and say there's something else to it. So they say it is Hud. The courts say it's Hud, and the second thing they say is that there's an ijma. Ijma means consensus. So I promise these are the only two terms I'll use that are not in English, Hud and ijma. Ijma means consensus, and what ijma means is that there's a consensus on the above that it is God's law across the Islamic legal tradition. So what happens is Hud plus ijma is God's immutable law, right? And by maintaining this consensus, and I'll go into this consensus and this equation, they've been able to disallow and dissent. And I'm sure it happens in a lot of discourses where people say, hey, this has been discussed before and there's been an agreement on this before. The chapter is closed. The conversation is closed. And so the references to the validity of this position that Hud and Ijma has been repeated at all the critical spheres. First, in the formulation of the law 295C was first passed in 1986 under General Zia's parliament, right? A parliament that was not democratically elected. And if you see the debates, and I've read all the transcripts, and that's my point, no one has read those transcripts. People who are asking for reformation of the law, I've talked to them. They do not know what went on in the parliament when they were passing the law. And I'll talk into that. And that's the first time that they went into this, that it's a Hud and there's an Ijma on it, right? Then the federal Sharia court, when they canceled out the life imprisonment, you know how there was a change in the letter of the law? Again, reinforced that it's Hud plus Ijma. And then you had these political rallies, TV shows, print, text, fatwas, Hud plus Ijma. So what happens is that in the minds of the common man, and I'll show you a video clip to give you an example of that, is God's law. It is divine. As ridiculous as it might sound that those words, some of which are imported from the British law that came before, and the 60-page judgment, all of these things are now God's law. And that's quite heretical in Islam as a belief that any word outside of God's law. Now, and government, Salman Taseer asked for the death penalty to be waived for Asia Bibi, and Shair Rahman asked for the punishment to be reduced to 15 years. And both of them, Salman Taseer obviously got assassinated, Shahbaz Bhatti got assassinated, another government official, and Shair Rahman had to take back her amendment bill because there was a blasphemy accusation against her as well. So before I go into examining that, let me show you how, for all you know, I might be making all this up, right? So I've tried to do a bit of, so first let me give you a sense of, and this is going to be a little loud, I'm going to lower the volume. This is two fatwas were given, two sermons were given by people who are not really muftis to assassinate Salman Taseer, right? A few days before his death. So I'm going to play the first one and to give you an idea of how much passion it comes with and moral authority that it comes with. The subtitle might be difficult to read because it's a very low quality video made of a mobile phone. So he started off with saying that how can Salman Taseer say something like that, and we know how to kill someone who says something like that, and then right away he's like, we are the protectors of the dignity of the Holy Prophet, and he gets them to chant that. Yeah, so he's saying, don't be cowards, right? And there is an appeal to the masculinity and honor of these men. There's a gender issue here as well. Women don't respond to this the same way, in a violent way. Men are exposed to this so much more that it makes the issue of honor. Like, it's your honor. Are you man enough to do this? And we see that in a lot of these narratives. Okay, now this is as disturbing as it is a very important figure. No religious knowledge whatsoever, because you don't see any argument, right? But he says, riddle Salman Taseer's body with bullets, right? And this is haunting, because his body was riddled. I read a newspaper, and that exact word was used, right? Riddled with bullets. And that nobody can arrest us now. He said that.
इंतजामिया सुन रही है तो सुने लिखो पक्के पियानो बाल पिन से लिखना निकालो उस कुत्ते को, देखना अगर उसकी लाश भी पहचानने के काबिल रही तो फिर बात करो। निकालो उसे, जो रसूल की बेइज्जती करे और पाकिस्तान में जिंदा रहे, कोई हक नहीं है। बेशक, बेशक। नहीं, वो खुद तुम्हारी फूंकों से मरेगा ना, तुम फूंक मारोगे तो वो मरेगा, दम डालोगे मरेगा, या गोली से मरेगा।
So here it is. He's like, is he gonna die out of your prayers, or is he gonna die by your bullets? So it's almost like he's, what's that word, emasculating, like, are you gonna pray and are you gonna kill him with bullets? And they keep screaming bullets, bullets, bullets. Now there's a reason I show you this video. It's not for shock, right? I want you to get an idea of how much weight this carries. You can almost feel it, like it's scary, right? Talking to these people. And I've met this guy, and he's come to UK. Why is he allowed a visa? I don't know. I was rejected a visa in UK when I was called by Oxford. And this guy goes to UK regularly. And someone needs to do something about that. But yeah, and the second part where I'm saying people are claiming a particular narrative, ijma consensus. So it's a little clip that I put together, and I learned how to do subtitles, and I made subtitles, right? So it's an SRT file, yeah. So you can watch what they're saying. Oh, sorry. Mufti Hanif Qureshi, one of the two muftis who were responsible, really. I mean, I say before you killed Mumtaz Qadri, you needed to get these two guys. And there was an FIR registered against the first guy. And he said, I have nothing to do with this. He said, I'm a Barelvi, right? I'm a Sufi Barelvi. We're a people of peace. And he was let go of. I don't think that video was available as an evidence at that time. People haven't seen those things. As I said, the discourse, deconstruction at that place. I believe it was somewhere in Gujranwala. I'm not very sure. You can't cite me on this because I'm not very sure. I'll try to find out because he goes all over Punjab, and there's these areas in Punjab that are more susceptible to these kind of conversations. So I'm going to now play a small little clip. It's a 1-minute clip to show you the Hud plus Ijma thing happening, right? Apart from, if you can all see the debates in the parliament, and those are documents, public documents, and you can see that claim there. But what about social discourse?
के दौर से लेकर हमारे ज़माने तक इजमा चला आ रहा है, इत्तेफाक चला आ रहा है कि शातिम रसूल वाजिबुल कत्ल है।
इससे नीचे कोई सजा नहीं। तमाम उलमा कह रहे हैं आज साबित है, मादी उसको मार दो, कत्ल कर दो जहां मिले।
ये सब इजमा और इत्तेफाक के साथ है।
मौत की सजा दी जाएगी, इससे कम कोई सजा। एक इजमा हुआ, कोई डिबेट नहीं है, सजा मुतय्यन। गुस्ताखे रसूल वाजिबुल कत्ल।
तमाम अहले इल्म का इस बात पर इत्तेफाक चला आ रहा है।
पूरी उम्मत का इजमा जिस पर है,
इनके अंदर किसी एक शख्स का भी इख्तिलाफ हमारे इल्म में नहीं।
हनफिया सबका इत्तेफाक और इजमा है, ये हानत रसूल की सजा कत्ल है।
एक भी ऐसे मुसलमान का पता नहीं है जो ये कहता हो कि गुस्ताखे रसूल को कत्ल नहीं करना चाहिए।
Yeah, so he's talking about Asiya Bibi because when they're talking about Salman Taseer, they're essentially talking about Asiya Bibi, right? So they're talking about a non-Muslim, and they're saying, we don't know keep saying this thing. Even the parliament, they say, we don't know a single dissenter, a single Muslim jurist who has said no to killing. And this guy is the second mufti, by the way, Mufti Ashraful Qadri, who gave a fatwa to assassinate Salman Taseer. And I believe this was the more influential one. And I'll do a little deconstruction of what he said as well. Mufti Ashraful Qadri, Qadri, Mumtaz Qadri, Ashraful Qadri. Okay, so what I want to do is, I want to now, like, the grim section is over. Now is the hope section, right? Parliament debates, multiple scholars in the parliament, and then you heard him the guy, and that was the same fatwa, and I'll go later into it, in which the sermon in which he calls for Salman Taseer's assassination, that there's not a single dissenting position on blasphemy. And this is, these are all Hanafi scholars. One of them was a Jamaat Islami scholar. I'm calling them scholar loosely, right? They're not really scholars, but they're all Hanafis. And Hanafi is an Islamic legal tradition. There are 4 Islamic legal tradition, Sunni legal tradition, right? So Hanafis make up most of the scholars and muftis in Pakistan. And these guys are trained in Hanafi tradition. They are not trained, it's like being trained in British law. You can't go and practice in the States unless you understand their law. The hermeneutics and the methodologies are different, right? So these are all Hanafi scholars. So this, for example, this is the parliamentary debate. You guys might be interested in it, the policymakers. So they're saying that this mein zara bhar bhi ikhtilaf nahi hai, which means you can't even find a little bit of dissent. And the sermon that called for Salman Taseer's assassination, he says, I don't know a single jurist, we just heard him, who deferred on the matter of death penalty. And he cites Imam Abu Hanifa in the lecture, Imam Abu Hanifa is the founder of the Hanafi legal tradition, all right? So the claim is, there's not a single jurist who did not prescribe fixed death penalty for non-Muslim blasphemy, because he's talking about Asiya Bibi, including the founder of the tradition, Abu Hanifa. So let's investigate the Hanafi tradition. Because they've been at it for 30 years, no one's thought, okay, what book are you citing? Let's take a look what you're saying, right? So what we did was, in collaboration with the wonderful people at SURF, is that we did an exhaustive study of the Hanafi legal tradition on the issue of Sabr Rasul, right? On the issue of Sabr Rasul. And this, is this clear? Can everybody see this? Yeah, okay, I was trying to full screen it. Okay, so we start with Abu Hanifa, right? Now, Abu Hanifa is the founder of the text, so I'm like, okay, let's see what he's saying. And Abu Hanifa is saying, if a dhimmi, and I'll go into the dhimmi aspect of it later, but when they say dhimmi, they mean non-Muslims, right? If a non-Muslim insults the Prophet, he will not be killed as punishment. So right off the bat, he's talking about a prohibition. He's not even talking about a discretionary punishment. He's like, you cannot kill them. A non-Muslim is not killed for his denial of the Prophet or other blasphemous beliefs. Disbelief and shirk, polytheism, are bigger sins than insulting the Prophet. We do not kill them for that. The protection that the state has given them is already premised on their blasphemous belief. Anything that they do in insulting the Prophet is merely an extension or an increase in that disbelief. So if you do not kill them for that, why would you kill them for that? So that was his analogy, and that a lot of my more secular humanite friends find this a very good logic. It's like, that's what we say. Why, a non-Muslim, how can he blaspheme? He's already a non-Muslim, right? He would obviously say that Prophet Muhammad was not the last prophet. That's blasphemy. So that was Abu Hanifa, and one could argue that Hanafi tradition is like a 1,200-year-long tradition. It's rich. There are a lot of competing narratives in a lot of traditions. So what we did was okay, let's exhaustively study it. So literally, we went through like 60, 65 classical texts. And the ones that actually talk about this issue, insulting the Prophet, like for a lot of them, it was not even an issue. It was an issue for Muslims, and I'll go into that later, because my main focus right now is Asiya Bibi, Salman Taseer, so I'm talking about non-Muslims. So that was the first guy. And then Abu Hanifa had a student, Abu Yusuf. And Abu Yusuf again says, and you've got the Arabic, English, and Urdu translation. It can be, the link is engagepakistan.com/timeline/source if anyone wants to open it up on their phone as well. So if a non-Muslim insults a prophet, the contract of protection does not break, he will not be killed as punishment. So their claim, there's not a single jurist that states otherwise, is already like, I found 2, right? So let's go forward. What's the next one? So the next one was Imam Tahawi. He's a huge scholar in all traditions because he wrote the creed that is very popular in Sunni, the theological beliefs, right? And he says that if a non-Muslim insults the Prophet, he will be given a verbal warning. So this is the first person who talks about any penalty at all. So he says a verbal warning. Now Shari Rahman came in and she said 15 years. Could we do this 15 years? And there was a blasphemy accusation against her. Now, these are the people that they revere. These guys that I show you, These are saints for them. So if these were alive right now, they would register cases of blasphemy against them because they are saying things that are a lot more radical. And then he says, if he does it again, you can punish him, but he will not be killed, right? My focus is in the not be killed part right now, and I will go into the punishment part later. These are two separate things. But they're literally saying don't kill him. Again, his student then says, these are students after students after students because it's a legal tradition is oral. So they have students. So his student says, whoever insults the Prophet will not be killed. His student says, Quduri is taught at Pakistani madrasas. Now you guys might want to write this down. In Pakistani madrasa, the course which is called Dars-e Nizami, they've got the text of jurisprudence. So if you're talking to one of these scholars, you can actually say your own text, which you read to learn fiqh. Fiqh is Islamic legal theory and jurisprudence, says this. So Mukhtasar al-Quduri is the name of the text. It's taught at almost every madrasa of Deoband and Bareilly madrasas, right? And he says, if a non-Muslim says the Prophet, it is merely an increase in his disbelief. You can't kill him. It's an increase in his disbelief, nothing more. And then he says it again, that Zoroastrian says that there's an opposite to God. Jesus says he is the Son of God. These are all blasphemous beliefs. We're not going to kill them for that. Therefore, we won't kill him for insulting the Prophet. And this goes on and on. Another text that is taught at Dars-e Nizami by Kasani, Al-Kasani, Badaya Sanai, non-Muslim insulting the Prophet is an addition to disbelief. And you go on and on and on. Student after student, not be killed, will not be killed, will not be killed. This is the whole Hanafi canon, and we cannot find a single person. There's an interesting person before this, Qasim ibn Qutb al-Bughad in 1474, and his teacher tried to add this caveat, which said that, what if we, in the social contract we have with the non-Muslims, when we've conquered the lands, right? And we've written a contract. If we add this term that, you cannot insult the Prophet, if you do, we'll kill him, if we explicitly state it, then maybe we could kill them, right? He expressed a certain wish, a condition, and his student immediately said, we should not follow his opinion. Because he said, this is not about our heart. We will always go to our heart and try to find a harsh punishment. But Islam and Islamic jurisprudence is not about your own self. Don't project your own sense of self and anger and insecurity onto Islam. That's why he said we adhere to the principles that have been laid down instead of making it about our wishes. If you are a violent person, you'll have a violent Islam. And that's what he's saying. Do not follow your heart on this. Follow the text. And that's something that is so profound for today's time. And it would be almost redundant to show it all, so you can see it. It's after text. We will have scans of the text available over here as well. Fatawa al-Amgiriya was actually the code that was there before British came, right? So for the first blasphemy law that British produced, before that, you could say there was a code of blasphemy. And it said, if you insult the Prophet, you won't be killed, non-Muslims. So people say there wasn't a blasphemy law before British. In a way, there was. And it said non-Muslims will not be killed for blasphemy. It's in Fatawa al-Amgiriya, right? It's a very popular text as a reference material. So this timeline goes up to till the end, and these are these brave scholars. Sorry? You did not. You did not. I'm sorry for talking fast. I'm going to talk slower. So before the British law, there was this reference book. So the law was very loose. It was not coded the way it was coded in British law, right? So they would cite a lot of these texts. So Fatawa al-Amgiriya was a text that was almost like an official code. And it stated that if you're a non-Muslim, if you insult the Prophet, you will not be killed. And right up to 2011, we've got scholars from Deoband still calling for a reformation of the law because it is wrong. I'm just a messenger. There are scholars on the ground who are opposite of the people and who are legitimately scholars, right? And they're saying the same thing. Why are you trying to revise the tradition? So this brings us to an interesting point that if these are not what happened, and 4 of these texts, by the way, have 250 commentaries. One of these fatwas had 450 signatories, including the founder of Deoband and the founder of Bareilly School of Thought. And also the founder of Jamaat Islami, Maulana Maududi. also said that a non-Muslim will not be killed for blasphemy. So you've got the founder of Barelvi School of Thought, Ahmad Raza Barelvi. You've got one of the founders of Deoband, I forgot his name, there were 3 founders. You've got the founder of Jamaat Islami, Maulana Maududi, all saying the same thing. If you insult the Prophet as a non-Muslim, you will not be killed. And the followers of all these people are saying, we don't know a single jurist who said otherwise. So this is the opposition right now, right? So it says the current representation of the law is, it says it's a Hud offense, right? That's what they say, it's God's law. The authentic is that it's not God's law, it's at the discretion of the judge, whatever you make, natural law, secular law, whatever you want to call it. There's a consensus on death penalty, is what they say, and the actual consensus is there's no death penalty. It's not that there's no, the answer isn't that there is no consensus on death penalty. The answer is there is a consensus on no death penalty. So it's the actual opposite. Throughout the Islamic, the Hanafi legal tradition, there's a consensus that you will not be killed. And then again, they say not pardonable, which is something that Salman Taseer talked about, not kill him, and it is pardonable. So the problem becomes then, how did we as a Pakistani community go from unanimous prohibition of killing to unanimous mandatory killing, right? This ethical corruption, if I may call it, has happened at all 3 spheres. Number one, at the parliament, they would just cite sources. So they cite Ibn Abidin and say that he says there's an ijma, there's a consensus on this. And if you go to the timeline and you look at Ibn Abidin, he's saying you will not be killed if you insult the Prophet. Then they say, look at Fatawa al-Imgiriya. Here they are, it says Fatawa al-Imgiriya, that there's this part. Say the same thing. And we just looked at Fatawa al-Imgiriya. And no one in the parliament was like, okay, actually there was this one guy, because it was a Zia parliament, dictator parliament, but there was this one guy, hey, can we fact check this? I'm paraphrasing, because what's the hurry? Because they were like, pass the law, pass the law, pass the law. And they're like, we can always amend the law later if needed. That's a joke now. They're like, let's pass the law right now. It's getting late at night. They were there for a long time. We want to go back home. Let's pass it right now. The whole text is available on the National Assembly Pakistan government if you find it. July 9th, 1986 is the date. July 9th, 1986, right? And when you look at these texts, it says the opposite. And what may be happening is that they may be applying apostasy rulings on non-Muslims. That, because on the same text, there is apostasy rulings, and I'll go into that. That if you're a Muslim and you turn into a non-Muslim, if you insult the Prophet, you turn into a non-Muslim. So a non-Muslim obviously cannot become a non-Muslim, right? I mean, he's already a non-Muslim. So in a way, because the citizenship does not differentiate between Muslims or non-Muslim, in a way you have this bipolar constitution thing, and I'll go into it later, that you're applying Muslims, and you take a Muslim ruling, and the next line says, so whoever defiles the name of the Prophet, and now the whoever includes everyone, right? And the non-Muslims like, why are we here? We're not amongst these people. And then the Sharia court, they cite Abu Bakr Jassas. Yeah, please.
So, if a Muslim would commit blasphemy, then it would be death?
It's a death penalty if you don't retract the statement. It will be an apostasy issue. And I'll get into that, the Muslim part, right? It's a little more nuanced, right? But I'll try to do it in a 10-minute bit. Yeah, but there are more nuances than just death penalty, but it's a little more complicated than this. This is a lot more clear-cut, right? And I'm a lot more sympathetic to the non-Muslim cause anyway, because they're 26 times more likely to be accused of blasphemy. Non-Muslims are 26 times more likely to be accused of blasphemy, and they make up like 3-4% of the population, right? So anyway, they say Abu Bakr Jassas, one of the scholars, students, says he who insults the Prophet becomes an apostate, right? And then the judgment says whoever insults the Prophet. And when you look at Abu Bakr Jassas, he's saying whoever insults the Prophet will not be killed amongst the non-Muslims. And that's the original source. I scanned the original source for you guys, just for credibility. But I've got the text for all of these things. So, and then another tradition, one of the seminaries that wanted to establish a consensus that this is all death. You blaspheme, you death, case closed. So Hanafi seminary, funded by Saudi Arab, no surprises there, right? And they issued a fatwa And the fatwa says, and there's where the other traditions come in. So there are non-Hanafi traditions from Saudi Arabia and Egypt, where they don't follow Hanafi, that do say non-Muslims will be killed. And I'll go into that in my second part. And they say these people have endorsed the same position that anyone who insults the Prophet will be killed. These are all scholars, Imam Layth, Ahmad, Ishaq, Shafi, that are not Hanafi scholars. Again, for example, it's a British lawyer talking about the American law. And then they say ... and Abu Bakr Farsi quotes Imam Shafi, and then again other traditions. So the one thing, I mean, there's one thing that strikes out in this, right? For me, was this ... Right, did they run out of paper space, right? Like, were they trying to save space? Like, what was it that they were trying to do with the dots? And I was just curious. I thought maybe it was this long-ended explanation that they wanted to show. And I was also curious because they didn't show the Hanafi position. And they're a Hanafi seminary, right? And when I opened up the dots, like I went to the source, it's Ibn Munzir, it says Abu Hanifa differs and states that a non-Muslim will not be killed for blasphemy. Shirk, polytheism, disbelief is a greater sin. And that's the exact source that they're quoting. And these are the one that was in the dots. That's not very long. I mean, you guys agree with me, right? That's not long enough to be hidden with ellipses, right? So they found a new way of using ellipses, literally obfuscating the truth, ... et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a very important fatwa because it's in a book, which is one of the most popular fatwa books, contemporary books, right? And no one's looked into it and challenged it. Now I want to go into something. You might want to draw this with me. I'm going to talk about Salman Taseer and the story and I call it a game of tombs, right? And I'll tell you how it's a game of tombs. Now we're coming to both Muslims and non-Muslims issue. And I'll touch on the Muslim issue, and we can talk about apostasy later if you want to. So Abu Hanifa in the 8th century said that blasphemy for Muslims is not a God's law. He said it's not Hud. Again, right? He said it is apostasy, which amounts to treason against the state. So what the person has to do, he has to retract his statement, right? And reaffirm his allegiance to the state as a Muslim. So, but the important point is, Abu Hanifa says that it is a pardonable offense if you do it, and it's not God's law. And then Ibn Taymiyyah, I don't know if you know about him, Ibn Taymiyyah. He's a scholar, a 13th century scholar. He was a bit of a reformer of his own times. He writes in his book, the book is called Sarim al-Maslul. It's only available in Arabic. And it's an unprecedented book because the first book, which said Muslims or non-Muslim, you blaspheme, you die, no questions asked. And he wrote this book in a jail. He was jailed for punching a guy who insulted the Prophet. And he was jailed for leading a mob towards the person who insulted the Prophet. And he was jailed for bringing a disorder. And in that jail time that he wrote a whole book out of his memory. But he quoted Abu Hanifa, right? And he said, Abu Hanifa says that it's not a Hud offense. I disagree, right? Now he quotes him perfectly right. So Ibn Taymiyyah is not a Hanafi scholar, obviously. He's not a Hanafi scholar, not from the same tradition. He was quoted by a Hanafi scholar called Bazazi, right? Bazazi from 14th century. And Bazazi misquotes Abu Hanifa. This is 14th century. Deliberate or not, we don't know. He says Abu Hanifa and all the scholars of Kufa, which means all the Hanafi scholars, say that it is a God's law. I'm replacing Hud with the word God's law, right? And therefore not pardonable. And what happened was, this is a misquotation. So I made a little cross there, right? That's wrong. And then he had students. This is an oral tradition. You don't have Facebook and these interactive timelines that you can use. That misrepresented position became canon, right? So if you've got there are these superhero comic fans and they go like, where's the underwear Superman wears? Why is it not outside anymore? You're breaking the canon, right? They go like, you're changing it. There's a parallel canon. Superman is supposed to wear underwear outside his pants, right? Right? So they're like, if someone says he never wore pants, right? So if someone says that, that's what they're saying. That's the canon. And what happened was there's a long line of students that he had that quoted Bazazi and that there's a parallel tradition on Muslims, that this is God's law. Then came Ibn Abidin. I know it's not a lot of names, but the story is what matters. Ibn Abidin was an Ottoman jurist who's called the seal of Hanafi scholars. The reason he's called the seal of Hanafi scholars is because he used to investigate in figuring out, because he used to say that a lot of times these positions get misquoted because it's an oral tradition. So he investigated primary resources. So if any of you is a professor, you'll know some students will claim to have seen the primary text, but really they've just seen the secondary text. So that's what Bazazi did, right? He says Abu Hanifa said this when in fact he misread Ibn Taymiyyah. So Ibn Abidin saying, no, it's all wrong. The actual tradition is go back to the classical text. Abu Hanifa said this. It's not God's law. And he says that this line of Hanafi scholars, his words are, paraphrasing, if we do not correct this, if we do not re-examine this, this is going to create a lot of problems in the future because prophet is a very controversial issue. And that's prophetic lines right there, right? You should be very careful about this. So I think he was talking to me, so I took this up. I'm going to be careful. Hey, I'm going to take this up. So now here's the funny bit in a dark sort of comic tragedy. The architect of the law, Advocate Ismail Qureshi. Ziaul Haq is not the face of the law. Advocate Ismail Qureshi is the face of the law. He drafted the law. Then he petitioned for the law to be called God's law in the Federal Sharia Court. He was part of Jamaat Islami, right? And I have a lot of access to Jamaat Islami. And so I'm going to talk about that, right? But Ismail Qureshi quotes Ibn Abidin, and he says, he took Bazazi's lines and said Ibn Abidin said that. So everything that Ibn Abidin was refuting, and he refuted it in a book of 60 pages, Rasail Ibn Abidin. He said this is ridiculous that it's God's law. It's not. And Ismail Qureshi quotes Ibn Abidin as having said what Bazazi had said. And then he later changed it even further, and I'll go into it. But what happened was, therefore, that became the narrative in Pakistan as well for Muslims. It's a huge disservice to Ibn Abidin. The very thing he was trying to do, you put his name. Because no one knows who Bazazi is in Pakistan. He's a small-time scholar. Ibn Abidin has a lot of moral authority. So not only are you misquoting him, you're actually attributing the statement to him which he's refuting. And then came from this canon further false fatwas for assassination. Salman Dasi was really saying what Abu Hanifa was saying without knowing that he was saying what Abu Hanifa was saying, right? But he was still saying it because it makes a lot of common sense. And he died. So all these misquotations historically, and we have original primary text to prove it. So I went to Ismail Qureshi. I went to meet him because he is citing this. You know what he said? He said that Ibn Abidin is saying this. This was all for Muslims, the story that I told you. He said, Ibn Abidin saying a non-Muslim blasphemer will be killed under Hud, God's law, and his pardon will not be acceptable. In reality, he was refuting this sentence. A Muslim blasphemer will be killed under Hud. So the two levels of misappropriation happening. Number one, he changed the word Muslim to non-Muslim. Number two, he is attributing the statement that he refuted to him. And if there's a student of jurisprudence here, he would realize Ibn Abidin is a huge name, so that happens. So I went to not Ibn Abidin, I mean. That would require like a Doctor Who machine, right? Like going to Ibn Abidin, you were right about this. So I went to Ismail Qureshi, and I was like, he hugged me for like 3 minutes because he thought like I was the pro-blasphemy law guy. Because I came from a reference from Jamaat Islami, so he's a really old guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to tell you how to defend this law. I'm going to tell you how we made this law. And then he told me stories. He would later regret the stories he told me, the inside stories. And I was like quiet, right? I wasn't telling him. I was like, go on, tell me everything. I showed him, this is what Ibn Abidin said. This is what you said. Could you correct this in your book? Tell the courts, tell everyone, make a press release. It's a huge mistake. It's like, I can't read this. It's like, why not? It's in Arabic. But there's not a translation available. It's only in Arabic. It's like, I haven't read it. It's like, but you're citing it. It's like, I heard it from a scholar. He cited the exact page number in the petition to the Federal Shariat Court, the highest court. It's comparable to Supreme Court. And in the Parliament, he's citing exact pages. And he's like a bad student, right? But at a level that kills people. And then I translated from my Arabic is bad. So I read all of this under muftis, great scholars in Pakistan, amazing scholars in Pakistan. I read it under them, and I was like, this is what it says. I was like, yeah, I might have made a boo-boo, I might have made a mistake, I was like, okay, let's fix it. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Why not? He used the word maslaha, maslahat in Urdu, maslaha in Arabic. It's in greater interest of the people. And this is a universal idea, right? People using, let's do this for the greater interest of the public. How is it in the greater interest of the public? So if we reveal this right now, the secularists are going to come in and change it, and they're going to just delegitimize us and take Islam out of Pakistan, make us secular. I'm just looking at his face, what are you talking about, right? And then he even told me Nawaz Sharif was the one responsible to ensure, someone petitioned for the law to be changed. And when the petition went in, Ismail Qureshi said, and by that time he didn't know that I was a double agent, right? So, and he said that I called Nawaz Sharif's father, right? And Nawaz Sharif's father was a good friend of his because both of them would attend the same ceremonies of celebrating Prophet. It's like, your son's government, in your son's government, and he's enacting this with a lot of theater, right? How can this happen? Tell him to take it off. He's in the executive, the judiciary, there's a huge wall of separation. But he said, stay on the line, I'll call him. And on the other line is Nawaz Sharif's father calls him to Nawaz Sharif and says, and he's reprimanding our prime minister and saying, take this back from the Supreme Court. And he did. The petition was withdrawn. And you know what happened now? When I went to appeal there, I cannot anymore. Because the Supreme Court has now said that the case is settled. The appeal went, withdrawn, case closed. You cannot appeal this now because it was done and taken back by the government itself. The tragedy of it all. I would love to go into more detail about this, but short in time. And the same misquotation that happened with the dots, the ellipsis misquotation, is the one that is searching. I think it's going to come back. Yeah, it's the same misquotation, Ibn Munzir. That's all right. That's okay. That's okay. It's the same dots in the fatwa, the second fatwa that asked for Salman Taseer's assassination, the Ashraf al-Qadri, right? And there is, it's a 1 minute thing. I would show it. I'm going to take my time. It's just a minute thing. And he is.
फिर फरमाते हैं क़ाल अबू बकर बिन मुनज़िर, इमाम अबू बकर बिन मुनज़िर ने अपनी तफसीर में कहा, अजमा अवाम अहलिल इल्म अला अन्न मन सब्ब।
Okay, so he's quoting what I'm showing you, right? He's quoting what I'm showing you, but okay, he
सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम युक़तल, इमाम मुफस्सिर मुहद्दिस Abu Bakr bin Munzir.
I'm going to forward this to the point where the dots come in.
وَمِمَّنْ قَالَ ذَلِكَ مَا इमाम इसहाक बिन राहवे का मज़हब भी यही है, इमाम शाफी रहमतुल्लाह अलैह का मज़हब भी यही है, और फरमाते हैं वो मिस्लिही क़ाल अबू हनीफा.
Here, he says मिस्लिही क़ाल Abu Hanifa, right? And I'll tell you what that means, right? At this point, he was perfectly right? Till here, he was correct. Now came the part that you usually use ellipsis for. But in his sermon, he can't use ellipsis. He went one step further. He manufactured a line. He says, Abu Hanifa said something similar. Mithlihi means, for example, similar to that example. And that he'll be killed. And then he added a few other scholars in it as well. And when Abu Hanifa says that non-Muslims will not be killed, he changed that to Abu Hanifa said that he'll be killed, and he said that in Arabic. Now, people don't know this because, and look at these guys, look at this guy. I mean, I look at this guy, feel sorry for him. It's like, oh man, I gotta go and kill some blasphemers, man. I had plans. Look at him. This is brainwashing. This guy was not gonna go back home and check the sources, right? But the guy who's telling him all these things knows what he's doing as deliberately, and that was my claim, deliberate. And this is the fatwa which called for Salman Taseer's assassination, basing on the premise that there's a consensus on this, on non-Muslims will be killed for blasphemy. And this is a Hanafi scholar. I mean, that was the only scholar that mattered to him. He's not trained in other traditions. So my claim one is correct. I'm just going to take 10 minutes more so that we have time for Q&A. Yeah. So that we have time for Q&A, right? So I think we can all agree that the claim one is correct. Pakistan's blasphemy law and supportive discourse is an institutionalized, deliberate perversion of Islamic legal tradition. It takes it, changes it, manufactures it, and tries to say there can be a conversation about it. Ever since we've tried to make it from within, we've got a lot of, now we've sort of co-opted them to a further stage. So Mufti Taqi Usmani, who's one of the most foremost scholar, actually, there was some guy who animated one of my articles, and that went viral in the madrasa circles, right? So there's a lot of Facebook access in madrasa on mobiles. Everyone uses it. And they took it to their teachers, and so Mufti Taqi Usmani said, finally, because I used to write to them and say, can you clarify this, you have moral authority. They would not respond. I would call them, not respond. Then they would say, ask something else, don't ask about this, right? And they finally said, yes, the Hanafi school prohibits killing, but there are other traditions, so we can follow that, right? And this is a guy who dislikes other traditions in other matters. In finance, he's given, we have to follow our own tradition. So it's like, there are other traditions, right? And the government has decided, so whatever, right? So there's Mufti Taqi Usmani. And so two legitimate concerns come out of it. Number one, are we as activists calling for some kind of theocracy, some kind of Hanafi state, right? Just because we found some good rulings on Hanafi, it's like, hey, let's make a Hanafi state. First legitimate concern, are we calling for a Hanafi state? Second legitimate concern, there are other school of thoughts, and this is a transnational issue. What if Egypt takes up Maliki school of thought, right? And let me address that. The discourse in Pakistan is committed by three separate frameworks. Number one, international human rights treaties. Number two, Islamic legal tradition. Number three, constitution and fundamental rights. Right now, the conversation is happening within these circles, right? They are not talking to each other. So when we say, are we calling for a Hanafi state? Absolutely not. There's no such thing as a Hanafi state. Ottoman tried to do that for a while, the Ottoman Empire. These are just resources that you use. What we're looking for is this: seeking a discourse that is rooted in Islamic legal tradition, and that's similar language to Marrakesh Declaration as well. They say rooted in Islamic legal tradition and aligned. So this little space at the melting point of constitution, human rights treaties, and Islamic legal tradition is the discourse we're looking for. Anything that does not filter through contradicts our social contracts and obligations that are more important. Tradition is immutable, tradition is fallible, so it will always filter through that contract. So if so that was the first thing, right? We're not calling for Hanafi state. And it will get clearer as I go forward. Non-Hanafi rulings that call for death, what's happening there, right? So what is the principle that animates the ruling? So I'll tell you what's animating it. It's similar to applying the rulings of a slave to a free man. I'll tell you how. They're talking about dhimmis. Dhimmis are protected non-Muslims who have limitations on the exercise of their speech and religious freedom, yet given a lot of protection, right? So there are things like 100 times more protection will be given to them, but you cannot pray very loudly, etc., etc. Now, there's a principle called saghirun. When you conquered them, this is pre-modern times, this is a conquest treaty. This tradition comes out of a conquest treaty, what you call the covenants of peace. So they say you have to be subordinate, you have to be subjugated, and we'll give you protection. When you insult the Prophet, they say you challenge that subjugation dynamic. We are the conquerors, you are the conquered. This can't fly. You have broken the covenant of protection, and now the dhimma, means protection, is broken. The life and property is no longer protected, and now you are a harabi. Now you'll be killed. Now that principle, now let's understand the question correctly. Blasphemy is a product of the social contract between state and non-Muslims. In the empire time, it was the dhimma. You conquered them, and there was a contract then. Now, it is the constitution. Because in the modern state, we made the country together. There were Christians who funded campaigns in 1947. And they are equal citizens. And that's what the Marrakesh Declaration is actually talking about. So the aspects of contracts that talk about subjugation, and they were always there in all traditions, in the Christian traditions, there were always some kind of subjugation on the conquered, that cannot be a principle that is relevant anymore. So an ethical reading would make it irrelevant. What about Hanafis? Aren't they also talking about dhimmis, as we said? So if we are not dhimmis anymore, non-Muslims, then how does that apply? That applies because there are two principles animating it, and you can write this down. The number one is protection of religious freedom. That's the one which prohibits death. Just a couple of minutes. That prohibits death, right? That principle is still relevant to our constitution. The number two is saghar, subjugation, subjugation, subjugation. That is not part of our constitution and social contract. That was the part which asked for verbal warning, discretionary punishment. So the first principle is applicable as per our social contract, the second is not, and what we're calling for is not a Hanafi state. It's an ethical and principled reading, not a literalist reading. Like you've got these Salafis who do a literalist reading of Quran, but there are also these traditionalists who are doing a literalist reading of the text in the tradition. It's like applying the rulings of a woman on a man, slave on a free man, dhimmis on a citizen. No, no. But there's still a common affair. And I always say this, I love these Venn diagrams, so you see a lot of them, right? So there is a common affair between dhimmis and citizen. And that part is protected, the protection. But this part is not. You can't subjugate them. Therefore, blasphemy law applies subjugation, Pakistan's blasphemy law, which is not the non-Muslim state contract. It ignores protection of freedom, which is part of our social contract. Whenever tradition promises protection of the property for a non-Muslim blasphemer, our blasphemy law takes it away, both life and property. If you look at the incidents, and some of you guys really know about this, these are the two things that get violated the most. And what are the consequences of all these? An increase, after the law was made God's law, an increase in accusation by 19,000%, an increase in vigilante justice by 2,500%, 26 times more likely for non-Muslims to be killed for blasphemy. It's a symptom of a greater crisis, the weaponization of the love of the Prophet. The crisis of zimmi versus citizenship that no one's talking about except lately the Marrakesh Declaration is. Whitewashing and revising Hanafi canon, and finally the structure of modern state, which is different from the structure of empire, and they're trying to put something into something that doesn't fit. And it's a mix, and it's more regressive than any empire could have been. So this is my final slide, is that reformations cannot be isolated in a single framework. It cannot be just human rights call for it. It cannot be just fundamental rights call for it. And it cannot be just Islam calls for it. No. You cannot just go like, oh, good Islam, bad Islam. That game's over, right? That's not a good game. There's no a single Islam. All of these are Islam, right? Islam is not a monolith. So you have to find within that legal rich tradition, and that's always been how it's been done. The governments used to apply 2% of these things. You have to filter through a constitution contract, and Pakistan's bipolar judicial system needs to go. Because there's the Federal Shariat Court, and there's the Supreme Court. The Federal Shariat Court is talking about zimmis, and the Supreme Court is talking about citizenship. So when I go to the Supreme Court, they go, and I talk about an argument that combines the two, social, Islamic legal tradition and constitution. They're like, you're talking about Islam, go to Federal Shariat Court. When I go to Federal Sharia Court and I talk about constitution, they're like, you're talking about constitution, go to Supreme Court, right? And there's a back and forth there. And there's no, and that's a bipolar system. And fiqh that I'm talking about, Islam, is part of the problem, not the whole problem. It's a political problem, it's an economic problem. It's a drone problem, right? As someone said in the past. It's a political problem, it's an economic problem. Fiqh is part of the problem, and I'm specializing in part of the solution. I do not claim that this is the solution. This is part of starting a conversation, and also the love of the Prophet has to be redefined. We have to reimagine not just the law, but the theology and what it means to love the Prophet back home. And lastly, is the obfuscation of truth in the name of the Prophet not blasphemy itself? Is that not the real blasphemy? lying in the name of prophet, because I'm here because I love my prophet. I am here because I love my religion, first and foremost. And then second, I come here because I love these guys, I love Jennifer, and I love talking about this, and I am committed to justice in the country. But first and foremost, I'm here because I love the prophet, and I don't want people to lie for him, because now people would think, oh, he was not a prophet of mercy. What kind of prophet would do that? Well, not our prophet, not in our religious name, not in Prophet Muhammad's name. If you want to make a law, call it your own law, and say we have a bloodlust, and if you want to fulfill it, don't say it's Islam, don't say it's the Prophet Muhammad. Thank you very much.
Wow, well, Arafat, all I can say is wow. That was really quite extraordinary. I think I said at the beginning I expected an enriching and an eye-opening presentation, and that was certainly the case, at least for me. I want to give the audience an opportunity to pose some brief questions, but just one thing I want to throw out to you. You know, you've laid out the case. You've made a very strong argument about all of these perversions, obfuscations, and outright lies that you believe undergird conventional thinking on the blasphemy laws. But if we could just move beyond that for a minute, and if you could talk about the advocacy nature of your work here. How do you bring this message to those in Pakistan that need to hear this message? And setting aside, you know, presentations at LUMs and places like that where you are preaching to the choir to an extent.
Yeah.
So I imagine that the religious leaders are a key target, and clearly you've had these discussions already. So just tell us a bit about how you take this message and what you've done with it in Pakistan.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, so there are two ways we're doing this, right? A, we're working grassroots, and we're working, this is obviously not grassroots, this is like uproots, whatever it's called, right? It's the other way around. But we talk to madrasas. We're trying to establish connections there. We're trying to get them to do workshops. They've got journals, like you guys do. They'll also have peer-reviewed journals amongst themselves. We're trying to be a part of that. We're saying, give us a seat on the table, right? And they're writing on that. I can tell you like 5-6 articles from muftis now writing on this. These texts and resources, a lot of them did not have that. Because, you know, a lot of these are historical documents. They've heard about it, and some of them are so happy. Oh, you've got Mukhtasar al-Quduri, sorry, Mukhtasar al-Tahawi. I've always wanted to read that. And that made them really happy. Right? We've got digital scans of all these books, right? Number one is that, talking to the religious leaders to talk to the people, right? But number two is something very interesting, which is that we've got, could this like video for a minute pause? Is it possible?
What's that?
That video, could it pause for a bit?
I don't think
Could you
so,
cut
no.
this bit out a little? Because if I want to explain this would be like behind the scenes.
I don't, yeah.
Okay, afterwards. Okay. So what we do is we have a way, let's say that we have a way of reaching the exact places that this conversation is here through social media. We have a way to reach, right now, almost 100,000 people
Right.
who are right smack in the center of the places where religious persecution takes place the most, right? In fact, I can just do this without showing the part because there's a problem, right? So the page is a social media page, and it symbolizes, it's an abstract idea of what it means to love the Prophet. It's all in Urdu, and we've got like, if you love the Prophet, like this page, right? And we talk about, if you love trees, if you love the Prophet, love trees. If you love the Prophet, love the animals, right? So we're trying to redefine what it means to love the Prophet, and it worked like amazing. And so what we would do is we would add in little messages of anti-takfirism, right? So it's like Jummah Mubarak to everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a Ahmadi or you're a Shia or you're a Sunni. We got great responses. But most importantly, this is the map where we have our likes, the social media likes, right? This is where we have our audience, and this is the exact places where the incidents are happening. This is the exact place where the hate speech and fatwas are coming from, and this is religious persecution and violence. So we are trying to attract the right audience and talk to people on social media using technology to construct a social engineering project where we can talk to people who are otherwise outside of realm, because there's a middle guy, there's the cleric, right? And most of these clerics are not educated. So we can't have a Friday sermon, we cannot have a jalsa, But we can talk to 100,000 people, and hopefully soon enough, 1 million people, every day, 3 times a day. Every day, 3 times a day, and tell them the truth. And these are not the choir. These are not preaching the choir. These are the people who are pro-blasphemy law. And we're trying to get them into the conversation by first sending soft messages, that love of the prophet can mean more than just that. And then eventually, we're not there yet, but we're going to talk about blasphemy. And this is our strategy of social media, use of social media. And the name of the page remains confidential because it's an abstract idea. And the reason it works is because no one thinks it's a Western thing or an Eastern thing or a Southern thing or a Northern thing. It's a concept, love of the prophet, that's it. And that's the beauty of Facebook pages. You can have ideas talking to you. So that abstract, so I'm not talking, that abstract idea is talking. And we use fonts and styles, we did research into it, that are very street cred legitimate, like bad graphics, really bad graphics, because they use really bad graphics. We understood the aesthetics, and we used that aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And we saw that it worked. Like I designed it myself, right? So I'm not a graphic designer. We don't have the money to hire a graphic designer, but I would always make sure, make the alignment wrong or crop it bad, because but that's our way on the social media. So that the two way for the on-ground advocacy. The stakeholder advocacy is different. We go to lawyers, ex-judges, parliamentarians, not a lot yet, muftis, human rights workers, you amazing people in DC, international communities, Muslim leaders across the world. That's the whole idea. Stakeholder engagement as well as the common people, but not through like on the street or television. That doesn't work.
Right.
Something new, an innovative way to reach people that were otherwise outside our normal audience. And obviously the whole lumps thing, you all already know about that, right?
Right.
I want to preach the choir to change their tune, or at least get in tune. Because right now our discourse, the counter narrative, as you may will, is not in tune. So I'm trying to also, I don't want to arrogate to myself this position of telling them what to do, but I'm trying to challenge the basis on which we should challenge the law. So there's also a lot of preaching to the choir. I mean, this is the choir as well, right? We're all singing. So I'm telling, let's add some new notes in there. Let's add a new song in the playlist, right? And so I can talk to people.
Interesting. Okay, we're going to take a few questions, and we're going to take them together to ensure that we can get as many as possible. So we'll start in the back there, the woman, I think that, yeah, yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, I didn't recognize you, Sahar. The lights are bright.
Yeah, sorry. Arafat, your presentation was amazing.
Thank you.
My question is, my name's Sahar Chaudhry, for the record, with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. The Commission's mandate per the International Religious Freedom Act is to provide recommendations to the President, members of Congress, and the State Department how to best protect and promote religious freedom. Obviously, this is perhaps the most important issue with regards to Pakistan's vast religious freedom issues.
Absolutely.
What are your recommendations to the U.S. government, to my commission, to evoke change? Obviously, you've talked about what can happen internally within Pakistan, reaching civil society, religious leaders, etc. How can the international community help promote these issues and protect these issues?
Okay, thanks. And pass the mic to the gentleman right in front of you. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Hi, Arafat. It was a great presentation. I just wanted to, this is kind of a further to the point that Michael was making, if you can give us a little bit more of a taste of what the response you've gotten from Muslim clerics, specifically, how, in terms of your engagement, what has been their particular responses.
Okay.
I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Sure.
Okay, and let's go to Pam on the other side of the room. Yeah, just hand it to Joshua. He can take. There you go. Yeah, right behind you. No problem.
Hi, Pam Constable from the Washington Post. I was so amazed when I saw that Braille-V online, and I realized that that man screaming and shouting was Braille-V. And so my question is, why is this happening? Is this, in fact, because I remember I was in Pakistan at the time of Taseer's murder. I talked to a lot of people, did a lot of work on it. Is this a sort of competition to get as radical as possible? In other words, between the Deobandis and the Braille-Vs and even others now, to see who can out-scream and who can whatever the word is you want to use, this has become such an emotional wave. I remember going to Mumtaz Qadri's house in Pindi, thousands of people pouring into the alley with flowers and posters of him on a white horse going to heaven. This is so emotional, and this is so, it's capturing all kinds of people that I think in the past would not have been swept up into it. So my question really is this the result of a sort of, is this a, I don't know if the word is a I don't know what the word is a gimmick almost for various religious groups who are competing for the support of the Ummah for their own ends, for their own agenda? Or is this actually sincere?
I'm sorry to burden you, Arafat. One more question to add. Right.
I need more questions, more hands.
We'll
I
take
love
one right
questions.
here, Farhat.
I need to get better. Yeah, please ask questions.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, let her go first. We'll get to you.
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly kind of, respond to the question, because that's sort of my overall, and it's going to sound really, I don't mean to make it sound so pessimistic, but it's my sense, two things. So first, the more we take on the blasphemy issue in the United States and in the West, the worse it gets in terms of reforming it on the ground. Because part of the complication is this sort of idea that, the global kind of movement towards blaspheming against the Prophet. And so when you hear some of the Deobandis talking about this, they will in fact they will refer to things like Denmark and all those other places. So there's this global background. So I think that's my, but the other thing is very much, I hope this is, I mean, it's not like, what is so interesting is that for vast majority of Pakistanis, they're not really that, they don't think about blasphemy. It's not on their radar. And so part of this issue is very much what I call, it's a very competitive religious market, and it is, in fact, competing over that market share. And that is, I think, what is going to make your work so much more complicated, because the political, I was saying to Michael earlier before, it's the political landscape that is so tricky. So you have wonderful arguments. I think you've done a great job of really assembling a case. But it's the political difficulties where I'm sort of pessimistic.
There was
You okay? Taking a few more?
Yeah, I'm just writing all of these down.
All right, there were two more. There's a gentleman with, is that a great tie?
That's a great tie, Michael.
Oh, I said, yeah, it's a great tie too, yes.
Thank you. Your passionate position is mostly based on the school of thinking in Islam. Is there anything in the Quran that gives us guidance on that? And secondly, what is the prevalent school of thinking in Pakistan? Is it the Hanafi, or could you claim other schools as well, so that to justify your individual positions that you may take on any particular doctrine or issue?
Good, and let's go up here to Anne, or at the front here.
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a long-standing question that you reminded me of. We're always talking about Deoband. What is the relationship now with Deoband? Is it completely cut off? Are the people who are Deobandis in Pakistan no relationship with Deoband, with no continuing conversation? Is there no feedback with India? I mean, with actual Deoband. I mean, the school. And I mean, is there any source of support for you through that, or any relation, so on and so forth? Yeah.
Great question. Yeah.
I think that's 6 or 7 questions. I think that should keep you busy for a few minutes.
Okay, all right. You guys can think of more questions for at that time. Okay, so number one, the recommendations to people in the state is, I mean, number one, try not to make it a savior project, right? Try not to make it a savior complex hero project. And back home, I've seen it happen where states want to fund things like these and label their name all over it and say that, you know, here we are civilizing the country. That's the first no-go area. But that does not mean that there is not a way to make international efforts and pressure work. I disagree with the notion that international pressure will always result in more difficulties. I just think it's just not done the right way. You know, slavery was abolished through international pressure in the Ottoman Empire. There's something to be learned. The United States government, what I think is already the United States doing is a lot of great academic work. So the academia is awesome. It's like 10 years ahead of all of us. I always say that. And they've taught us so much. So you've got like great institutions and places like these who should be funding research, right? And not funding workshops with taking picture of 50 people. And that's what you see. Requirements are you do a workshop, you brand it, you take pictures of 30 people, and it's like, hey, we're doing great work. No, you're not doing great work. You're taking pictures, that's all, right? And that's not the way it should work. And at the top level, I think people should know what the narrative is so that they can call them out on it. Not to say that, you know, we know Islam better than you, not at all. It's just that in your courts, in your parliaments, what you're saying as a state, what you're claiming in your own tradition, you have scholars, and mobilize international Muslim communities. So mobilize Egypt, like Al-Azhar, mobilize Morocco, mobilize Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayah. Get them to talk. So the conversation should not be directly in public between Amnesty, right, and Deoband. That's never going to happen. But something like Deoband, India and Pakistan, for example, I'll get to that, or Al-Azhar in Pakistan, or Zaytuna in Pakistan, now that's something that hasn't happened yet. And that's something like organizations like SURF are interested in, and that's really the key, I think. And number two, the responses of clerics, right? It's been both ways. I'm very careful about not trying to romanticize or demonize, right? I want to stay right and neutral. Yes, most of the madrasas would like to kick me out, right, and not listen to me. A lot of the institutions, they're dropout madrasa students who make institutions want to kill me. Yes, there's that. But there are these locally rooted scholars who might not look like you, who might not have like gender positions like you, but on this issue, they're very clear. And I've got great responses. I've learned a lot from them. I'm not a trained student for this. I learned all of this from Pakistani scholars, going from madrasa to madrasa to madrasa. This is 4 years of literature through them, compiling them through them. So there are great responses as well. The third question, is this sort of a competition? Yes, it is. I mean, I wanna like isolate two things. In the sphere of authority, there is the religious leader. For him, he knows all these things, right? He knows the tradition and the jurisprudence and the fiqh of it all. And he's in the fiqh of it all, right? And at the bottom are the people, commoners, as they would like to call it. And they would believe them, trust them, that they are telling us is truth, right? For them, it is a matter of identity. So they've given people a place to feel passion, you know, a place to feel sort of like a high, right? And they've given them a place to have a new identity. And the more binary it becomes, the question of whether either you're a loving Muslim or you're like they've made it binary so that you have to go there. And we're trying to create the third space that you can still be a Muslim, love the Prophet, and totally condemn this. So it's sort of a market, yes. It's even for Mumtaz Qadri, to add to the comments that you made, there's a competition going on. Who does Mumtaz Qadri belong to? So he was a Barelvi, right? So Barelvis issue fatwas after fatwas that Mumtaz Qadri did not eat dinner or lunch that was sent by Deobandi people or by Wahhabi people, who are two separate school of thoughts. So therefore, he's our guy. He used to say, I don't want to eat what Deoband sent me. I'll only eat what Barelvi sent me. So Mumtaz Qadri has been made into such a legend, and we need to demystify and from myth to facts that as well. So yeah, agreed on those comments / questions. Quran and Hadith, since I'm not so there are two reasons. There are scholars in Pakistan and India, and all over the world, who've written explicitly that there's no blasphemy law in Quran, that there's no blasphemy law in Hadith. That's like a modernist, reformist movement that's all over the place, right? I'm not an Islamic scholar. My personal reading of the Quran clearly says there's no blasphemy law. I'm not an Islamic. I'm an activist that's trying to connect to the tradition, right? You cannot establish authority in Pakistan by jumping 1400 years to the Quran and Sunnah, right? that kind of reform movement has not been successful. Javed Ahmed Ghamdi got, he's a dear, dear, dear mentor of mine. So he does this, right? He's a reformist. He's like, forget this tradition. The Quran says this. And the Salafis do it. The ISIS does it. Al-Qaeda does it, right? Most of the terrorists go straight to Quran and Hadith instead of tradition. Yeah, the Hadith, right? And even the Hadith, you don't find blasphemy laws in Hadith. You find instances where people used to insult the Prophet as well as commit treason, right? And from there they induce, okay, if you insult the Prophet, you will be killed. But the commentators of those Hadiths have said that that's not the case. The traditional commentators, because the crime was not blasphemy. The crime was, there was a battle going on. Ka'b ibn Ashraf is the one that you might have heard of. There are multiple hadiths, right? So there was actually a battle between Ahl Hadith and Deobandi scholars back in the 19th century on this issue, that the hadith says this, and the Deobandi scholars said, look at the grammar of the hadith. It says, kanat tashtimu. He used to insult the Prophet. This means that it is not a had. Otherwise, if the first time he did, he would have been killed. It meant that it was treason against the state, the head of the state, and in empire times it makes sense. And 450 scholars signed on that book in which there was that fatwa. So it's a very Ahl Hadith argument. But to answer in one word, there is no blasphemy law in Quran according to me, but I have no authority as an Islamic scholar. I am non-Islamic scholar. But modern Islamic scholars like Javed Ahmed Ghamdi, Wahiduddin Khan, that Asma has met, a great scholar, they've all talked about it. There's no blasphemy law in the Quran. Last question, Deoband India and Pakistan. We've tried, Deoband India actually has fatwas on their websites that are pretty much in line with this, right? In line with what I'm talking about. Not in the, that Muslims, it's an apostasy for Muslims, but they do not go detailed, like, they're like apologetic about their own tradition. So they don't want to talk clearly about but I think the questions are not right, framed right. The question will be, what is the punishment for blasphemy? The question should be, what is the punishment for blasphemy for non-Muslims, right? That's a framed question. Does it break the social contract? We've tried to engage them, but the thing is, it's very difficult. You lose a lot of your mileage and your cred, your madrasa cred, like street cred. But I think there are institutions that are much more helpful, that could be much more helpful in Turkey, in Morocco. I've tried at Al-Azhar, but I don't have access right now. And that's where higher authorities can come in handy. If you show them the text, and that's text that matter to them, I think it can work out, and that's part of our strategy that I was talking about, stakeholder engagement. I hope that answers some of the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's beyond 12, and we're going to have to wrap up. We could go on all day. This has been a truly remarkable 90 minutes for me, and I would assume for many others as well. Just wanted to thank you, Arafat, for the work you do, and also, as we all know, what he does, particularly in Pakistan, is very brave, very bold. So please be well and be safe as well. So if you could join me in a round of applause for Arafat. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm going to distribute my cards. Yeah, please do.